So this is the After Effects introductory tutorial. Basic how to do a very simple animation of a shape in After Effects. And what we're talking about in After Effects is a new composition. So once you open up the program, this is CS5, we're going to open up new composition. What you need to know about this window is that it sets up your animation, and your animation has to have a specific amount of time. So we're looking down here at duration. We're going to leave this at 10 seconds. I believe the default is to whatever your last animation was, or 30 seconds or something like that. You're also going to set up what your preset is so far as the size. For our purposes, HD TV 1080 at 29.97, which is your frame rate, is just fine. So we'll leave everything here the way it is. We could give it a name. We'll just call this one Test. All right, background color, black is fine. Great, so now we have the full user face for Adobe After Effects, which includes a project bin like Premiere, but if you haven't used Premiere, this might be new to you. And then we have down here, which is your test composition timeline. So you can see at this end is 0, 0, 0 frames, and this end is 10 seconds and 0 frames. Right, so from left to right will be our timeline, beginning to end. Right now we have nothing on our timeline because we have nothing on our composition stage, this area here. This is where we're going to be working. We're not going to worry about any of this stuff over here at this point in time. We're just going to create a shape. So your basic tools are up top, and you can do the same stuff with text or shapes, or you could draw something with the pen. We're just going to take a basic shape. Let's take a rectangle because it's the default one. Note that as I clicked on that, I get a fill and a stroke value. Comes up default red and white and 12 pixel stroke. So when I drag out a rectangle, you see it's red, white with a 12 pixel stroke. I can change that now or at any time later. For the purposes of this demo, let's just leave it alone. Okay, so now the only other thing that's changed here is, you might notice down on our test timeline, we have our shape layer 1, which we could give a name if we wanted to. You can just double, triple click, whatever, rename, and call it rectangle, red rectangle. Not necessary here, but if you were doing a more complicated animation with a bunch of stuff in it, it would definitely help you for organizational purposes. And then if it looks like this, and you don't have anything twirled down, you're going to want to get used to twirling down these little arrows, because that's where you're going to find stuff underneath. And the more you twirl down, the more options you'll find. So transform is where we're going to do all of our basic animations. What I like to do is go forward in time, maybe 3 seconds, and give this rectangle a place where we want it to be. Now you might notice that with my rectangle here, and I placed it in position in position, it gave me a keyframe, which is what this little dot here is, on the position value underneath of transform, just because I put it there on that amount of time. What it essentially did was it turned on this time vary stopwatch. It toggles the ability of the property to change over time. Alt click and add or remove expression. An expression is your keyframe. Essentially what that means is it added this frame, which is a setting in time for the position of the rectangle. We can make settings in time for the anchor point, which is this guy here. You can move that. The scale, the rotation, and the opacity. The anchor point's going to come into play with rotation and some other things, but right now we're going to leave it alone, unless you want to just drag it to the middle. So do like this. I like it in the middle because it makes your rotations happen from the middle of the object instead of from, you'll see. Right, so putting this back here. So we can turn that off because we don't really want to animate our anchor point on this one. I'm going to go back to the beginning of my animation by dragging my red current time indicator over, and I'm going to move my box off screen. And now you can see there's been a line that's been created between the point where I just moved it, and it's ghosted off the stage, and the point where it's going to wind up. If I come back down here, activating my test window, you see it's yellow on the edge, and hit spacebar to play my animation. Between my two position keyframes is my animation. This setting and time says I want it to be over here. This setting and time says I want it to be there. And the program creates all of the in-between frames in order to make that animation happen. Now let's say I want it to stay there for a certain amount of time. I need to set a secondary keyframe with the same values as this one. How I do that is clicking this little button over here, which looks like it's grayed out. It's add or remove keyframes at current time. Okay? What that does is it set a second keyframe, same value, like a pause. In between these two keyframes, nothing will happen. So that when I move forward and I drag my box off this way, or any other direction, it will now animate off screen. Without this second keyframe in there, this thing will never stop moving. And this keyframe kind of serves no purpose except to make the first move in, slower, because or faster, because there's less time here for this to move in than it is to move out. So let's show you the difference if that keyframe's not there. I just hit delete on my keyboard with it highlighted in yellow. You can highlight any keyframe by clicking on it or dragging a box around it, and you can delete them with your keyboard. So now the difference is when I play this, it just kind of keeps moving. You may notice slightly that it slowed down once it reached this point in time. But again, to put that back in, I can either Control Z, or I can go to this point in time and I can look at my position values for X and Y, 941.3 and 533.8. I could even make them a little bit easier to deal with, make it 940 by 530, and you can just click on them and type them in. Changed it almost imperceptibly. Then I'll go forward in time and make another keyframe and change it to 940 by 530. Okay, and it shouldn't move between these two, except that it does, sort of. So there's apparently something else in there I didn't do it quite right. That's the idea though. 2 keyframes, Control Z back. You have plenty of options there for undoing. Now put it back. Now between these 2 keyframes we have a true pause. Alright? The simplest animation you could possibly do. Bring something onto the stage, have it pause, take something off the stage. Really easy. The same thing could be done for any one of the other ones by setting keyframes where you want them. I'm going to set a keyframe here. I'm going to turn on my scale, turn on my rotation, I'm going to turn on my opacity, go forward in time, set keyframes, rotation, scale, and opacity, and then I could do keeping my pause, keeping my rectangle, original size and position this whole time in the middle. And then I go back to the beginning. Maybe I'll make my scale huge, maybe not that big. Well, let's take it right to the middle, see what happens. All right, and then my rotation, couple spins. I could have even just hit -1. One time spin at 0 degrees. And my opacity, take to 0. Alright, so now it's going to animate rotation and opacity and scale and position all at the same time as it comes in. Alright, so that's simple animation with some very simple scale, rotation, position. You could do some cool stuff. Then it's going to slide out. I could do some different ones here at the end and do the same thing, have it blow up, or maybe make it smaller. And again, you can type in the values, just put it to 0. Two, and opacity back to 0 again. So now it'll fade back out. Here's my whole animation. Hit space, and I can preview it. Thanks for watching. Hope this made sense.